Getty in 2014, just 325 Venezuelans claimed refuge in EU nations. In 2014, just 325 Venezuelans claimed refuge in EU nations, but that statistic has increased to a mind-boggling 11,980 in 2017. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has praised the country's socialist regime in the past and phoned into a Venezuelan TV show hosted by President Nicolás Maduro to discuss Tony Benn's death. Tory MEP John Flack said, "This makes clear what a poisonous bunch Jeremy Corbyn's pals in Venezuela really are. The fact the EU is having to take in people fleeing persecution shows how disastrous his vision of a socialist Britain is." Fellow Conservative MEP David Campbell Bannerman added, "Corbyn's Marxist Valhalla, Venezuela, is fast turning into Dante's Inferno. This is a real example of how extreme socialist policies lead to economic and social meltdown even in a country so rich in resources like oil. Britain beware. Corbyn could do the same to us." EU officials put the shift down to political and economic challenges in the South American basket case. They said, "The upward trend has continued in the first 2 months of 2018, with Venezuela being the only country of origin amongst the top 10 in the EU that saw an increase in the number of asylum applications between January and February 2018. On an annual basis, Venezuelan applicants for international protection in the EU have increased by over 3,500% between 2014 and 2017. Mr. Corbyn congratulated President Nicolás Maduro upon his election victory 3 years ago. Masses of people started to immigrate. Citizens in Venezuela's capital, Caracas, have been subject to shocking brutality from the regime, with armed police viciously beating political opponents. Getty. Mr. Corbyn congratulated President Nicolás Maduro upon his election victory 3 years ago. The people of Venezuela have also been forced to resort to eating zoo animals. Many senior figures in the Venezuelan government have been targeted by EU sanctions, including asset freezes and travel bans over the atrocities. However, Mr. Corbyn said in 2015 that people should celebrate the achievements of Venezuela in jobs, in housing, in health, in education, but above all its role in the whole world as a completely different place. Last year, when asked about the continued violence in the country, the Labour leader could only condemn violence on all sides. Getty. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has praised the country's socialist regime in the past. This comes after former Foreign Secretary Malcolm Rifkind claimed Jeremy Corbyn should not receive sensitive information that Theresa May shares with other governments who are within the Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, amid rising tensions between Russia and the UK. Speaking on the BBC Radio 4 Today programme, Mr. Rifkind claimed the fact that the Labour leader does not appear to have requested any information on the evidence obtained by the government about the poisoning of former 00 agent Sergei Skripal and his daughter suggests he is not interested in being convinced Russia was behind the attack. Mr. Rifkind also suggested he would not recommend sharing the sensitive information with Mr. Corbyn, saying the Labour leader's approach to foreign policy makes him tremble. He said, "If the information had been requested and refused, we would have heard about it by now." The fact that Corbyn does not appear to have sought any information that's available to other governments suggests he doesn't really wish to be convinced. You can assume that if various governments have been given access to intelligence information and Mr. Corbyn had requested the same and he had been refused it, by God we would be hearing it now. I'm not criticizing him for not requesting it, I'm simply saying that there is no evidence that he did request it.